Welcome back, everybody. It's DestinysJesus here. In today's video, I'm going to be doing an ultimate guide to getting your first earnings in these solo cash cups. Last week, I had a record 13 different people earn with the Solos Masterclass, and in the most recent event yesterday, 8 different people managed to get earnings, and I'm going to be taking a look at 3 of them on you because, of course, it's the hardest region, and how they managed to break down that massive barrier and get their first earns, all of them in the most recent cash cups. So let's get straight into this with tip number 1. All right, first thing first, the most important things that you can do to get earnings is going to be getting your cash consistently. As you can see here, what I'd recommend doing is avoiding being edge of zone, as you can see, and try to be a little bit more center on second zone. Obviously, do a normal loot route, get cap, wood, and brick, and also try to get as much metal as possible, ideally cap if you can. And then what I recommend doing as zone is about spawning now is instead of basing up, which is a slight mistake like this, there's no real reason to base up apart from not to get tagged, but just try to put yourself next to some mobilities. Try to have some slap juices you can pop, some mud you can slide on, or ideally, what other players doing very smartly is rifting just the second zone pops, so as their cash spawns in, they can instantly dive to wherever their cash is. As you can see here, owner of castle, the player we're watching getting his first earns, goes ahead and actually runs to his cash, which means that somebody else has already been able to mud to it, so he has to fight for it. So let's take a look at how to fight for your cash. It works in duos and solos as well. So the biggest mistake that about 90% of players make as they go ahead and start box fighting for their cash is they just approach it horizontally. They just do a regular clicks box fight style where they're smacking on a wall and the other players are able to do top right in peaks or do stare edits and fight them back. And the reason that isn't as effective as just approaching from the top like owner of castle is doing here is because it is 10 times easier to counter peek on the defensive horizontally compared to when you're fighting vertically like this. When you're down below somebody and they're approaching the top, especially when you're just fighting on the floor like this, it's extremely hard to get good counter damage. Oftentimes you're worried about editing your cone, stopping yourself and worrying about where the cash is, so you have the massive advantage approaching the top. Owner of castle does a simple edit here, just a right hand peek with the floor. Doesn't even right hand peek, it's funny, he just opens a wide edit and out trades the opponent. And now he's in a really good position. And one thing you'll notice is instead of healing up, he pressures the opponent back and gets this wall, right? He's got the damage advantage, he gets that wall control, then he pops a mini, and then very smartly here, he doesn't just hop on the wall and start fighting for the cash, he takes care of this left-hand wall. Always watch your left when you're in a fight, especially when you're approaching enemies' boxes. So now this other player can't right-hand peek him around here. Now he's able to pop a big on this wall directly, other players healed up to full, he's able to get his big off, very smartly. Now he's fighting, very simple fight, and very crucially he's timed this fight very well, so he's actually fighting as the cash opens. So as he's getting these walls, he's got the control of them, he's able to steal the slurps. Now the other person is forced into doing a bad peek, takes the wall, doesn't out trade, and then now just gets straight into the box with the flapjack. I'd highly recommend you guys carry the flapjack as well over using a MK for surge or even the mammoth pistol all the time. Just use flapjack, it's so much better for getting refreshes and for getting kills. One of the biggest zones that I see people trying to get their first earnings struggle with is these new max distance sort of 6th and 7th zones. So the zone plays half out, there's a lot of distance to go, and as you can see here, owner of castle is in a really busy location. There's a lot of players all around him that are going to make this rotate very difficult. Previously, I'd recommend either trying to rotate through dead side if you can, or trying to rotate early. I don't think early rotates are as effective at the moment because of the mammoth pistol. Mammoth pistol basically can hit you 180 or 195 in the back of the head as you rotate. So instead, do exactly this. Wait for about 20 or 30 seconds left on the clock before zones start shrinking in, so you're not going super late. Let some other players early rotate for you, let them build and let them get shot and let them get fought as they go in, and then try to catch a free rotate. One very important thing to do as well is to burn some wood as you come into zone, block some important angles behind you to make sure you don't get shot in the back and griefed, and also make sure to be aware of where other players are around you as you come into zone. Constantly do awareness checks, constantly do little 360s. One important thing to note here is actually owner of castle, because he went 20 seconds early and he's white lining into zone, as you can see, there's about 4 players behind him doing a similar rotate, so he's able to just block his angles behind, and because he's going slightly early, he's able to get in zone basically for free hit. Another important thing to note is try to avoid doing these zone wraps, like as you can see, like 6 or 7 players wrapping into zone from congested side. They're all going to come in a very tight spot. There's going to be loads of other players around them, box fighting them or shooting them. So instead, go ahead and just white line in and get into zone as quick as possible. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't try to be too smart. Just get into zone and time your rotate well by going about 20 seconds before zone starts shrinking in. One of the best things that you can go ahead and do as you rotate into 7th zone is try to get to a high layer. So many times people just get in and they manage to get a cheap rotate, but they put themselves in a bad position, boxing down on low ground or in a really congested area. Instead, as you come into zone, try to ramp up with wood and then swap to hard mats. as you get towards the highlights. You can see here, it's another player that managed to get their first earnings, ramps up with wood and then swaps to brick as they get into this higher layer. And it's not the highest layer possible, but it just means that you save so many materials on your next rotate, and you have a lot more opportunities for refreshes on your next rotate. So let's take a look at what he does later on from this high position. The reason why these high layers are so important is because, as you can see here, whenever you get a bad 8 zone, it means that you can time your rotate a lot better. You have a lot more information on players around you and what they're doing. As you can see, just sitting in this cone here, he's able to figure out when he wants to rotate. And also, he sort of wants to go for a refresh on this zone, which is exactly what he's going to go ahead and do. He waits for other people to rotate first. He waits for them to build in his rotate for him. And then he's going to look to get a free pump in the back on these players as they rotate and try to catch the last player rotating. Gets this free pump. And then here, he's just going to full send for this refresh as he spots other big. And this is why the LMG, the flapjack, is so important, because you can just get straight into box like he does here. Places the ramp, does a massive damage trade with this guy. But he's able to kill him, get a nice refresh, get an extra slurp back. And because he's the last player here, nobody else is going to fight him as he comes in. Next, as you rotate into 8th zone, very, very important. Again, is don't just box up on low ground. This is before moving zones. You guys need to get to a high layer so you can have an easy first moving rotate. Exactly what he does. He doesn't go directly on this guy's walls where the guy can box fight easily. He goes one off diagonally and make sure he's connected well by actually having these cones here. And then now he's in a really good position. And he basically also can actually play for height from this point on to try to conserve mats if he wants to. Really important that you guys play for these high layers later into the game. Now, as we come to moving zones, I want you guys to follow these 4 simple steps. It's going to allow you to save many more mats. It's going to reduce the amount of damage that you take. And it's also going to allow you to have a lot easier of a time rotating moving zones, especially first and second moving. Now, the first step is to go ahead and figure out what edge of storm you want to go ahead and play, and try to play the edge of storm the entire way through moving. So in this case here, Junior's going to go ahead and play left-hand side. It means he doesn't have to build walls on his left. Quite simple. Allows him to save a quarter of his mats compared to somebody else who's in the middle of the zone, blocking all their angles, who would be taking unnecessary damage if they didn't block those angles. Stick to an edge of storm so you don't have to waste mats on one side. Next is try to play high layers. It is really simple, guys, but do not be running around on a congested low ground or on a mid ground layer. There's a load of players around you to block angles. Instead, just try to sprint along high layers, which brings us to the next point, is to go ahead and just sprint your rotates. As you can see here, sprint forward, block some angles as you sprint and as you slide and as you go ahead and try to get front side. And then as you're done sprinting, as your sprint needs to recharge, or maybe you hear somebody right next to you, box up and pause. You do not want to rotate the entirety of moving zone in one go. As you can see here, while Junior's paused, he thinks about potentially taking height. It's a little bit early for a height take, to be honest, and there's somebody backside, so he decides to leave it. Pauses, and then he's going to go back to the very first step is, oh, I'm going to keep playing left-hand side of storm here. Makes it really easy to rotate. I'm going to keep playing high layers, and I'm going to go ahead and sprint. And now, as he's got sprint recharge, he's able to sprint fast forward, get some free shots on somebody, and then get to a high layer again, and he's going to go ahead and pause and start thinking about potentially taking height, or going ahead and potentially finding a refresh. Guys, moving zones are so simple. Just follow those 4 steps. They'll make your games 10 times easier. Now, as you go into later moving zones, specifically second moving, this is where you want to start thinking about getting a refresh if possible. As you can see here, Zinksbuko managed to get his first earnings, realizing he's caught up on the backside. You never want to be fighting around too early on backside. Maybe later into the game if you're desperate for a refresh, but never this early. So what he does, he goes ahead and does the 4 simple steps. First one is edge. He can't necessarily play for an edge of zone here because he's caught up on backside. So what he's going to go ahead and do is try to get to a high layer, and he's able to actually save his mats by getting to this high layer, because as you can see here, there's nobody on either of these layers, either side, that can actually shoot him as he goes ahead and rotates. He's going to sprint, use as much sprint as possible, and use some backwards ramps from that high layer to get completely down to front side. And now he's going to go ahead and pause. And this is a really useful build technique that Tayson actually used to win FNCS, which is the simple 2x1 with this stair backwards like this to save mats. And then you go ahead and build a box right here, just like this. And you're going to look for a refresh with your edit control. Always use your edits to look for refreshes. Either look backside by flipping your stair this way, looking back and holding people in storm, or what can actually work very well at the moment is looking front side. So using your 2x1 that you have to look towards front side, look for somebody that is running in the open or trying to use soaring sprints or trying to catch a free sprint rotate like these players are doing here. He looks forward, catches a guy who's 1 HP who just managed to soaring sprint off height, and now he's going to go ahead and go for the mats. And very crucially, whenever you get a refresh, make sure the loot is airtight. Make sure everything is secure. You block off all the angles, block off the back so nobody else comes and fights you. And then he's able to basically rotate him completely for free and start thinking about the next step, which is going to be the win conditions. Now, straight after you go ahead and get a refresh, I want you guys to always follow these 3 steps. First one is just get all the materials, just run across the body, make sure you get all the whites as well if possible, but don't get too caught up on getting all that ammo or things like that, or swapping out your guns. Don't do that. Instead, go ahead and get straight to front side, get as front side as possible. Next, go ahead and start layering up. So you're on an easier layer, you're not going to get caught by somebody spraying you or box fighting you. Just get to a nice chilling layer where you can go ahead and actually have an easy time of figuring out what you're going to do next. Now, the final part of this is going to start thinking about your win condition. Ideally, you're getting a refresh around second moving, and I want you guys to think about your win condition. And what is a win condition? It's basically what you're going to use to win the game. Some games you're going to be insanely stacked on whites. All you need to go ahead and do is tarp until final moving, and then you can run back in storm and play your whites, which of course is a very easy win condition, but it's a lot harder to execute properly than the main win condition this season, which is taking height at the correct time. I would always recommend doing this for taking height, which is first of all getting that refresh so you're good on mats. You can have a mat advantage over the players on high ground who have been cranking up on high and fighting lots of other players contesting, and then go ahead and using that high layer and that front side position is start ramping up and looking up at height. As you can see here, really simple height take, spots the player on backside trying to ramp up, shoots them out. I'd always recommend trying to get some damage on a player so they're not as likely to try fighting you for height, and then go ahead and crank up, get above them, get established up on high ground, and now he basically has a free win for the rest of this game. Now, when it comes to playing height, especially when you get a farm moving like this, there's a couple of very important things you need to do. First one is don't get caught up dropping too quickly down, right? As you can see here, he goes ahead and drops down to connect to this other player, make sure he's established. Do not play this layer, right? Pressure the other players below you, of course. Make sure this guy on second height won't be looking up, but do not play this layer right here. Instead, ramp up, get a little bit higher up so players can't sneak on you as easily from backside or can't play whites behind you in storm. So you can see, goes ahead and ramps up, waits for this other player to stop pressuring him. Now he's really well established on height. And as you can see, the front side players are starting to drop down. He's getting caught up a little bit on backside. So he goes ahead and connects, and then he's going to reverse ramp his way down and try to connect to these players on the front side. You do have to be really careful that you don't let the players on front side get too far ahead of you. Even here where he makes a mistake and he falls down, he's still able to crank back up and then go ahead and establish and connect to these front side players. Next, you need to go ahead and pressure the good players in second height. Of course, you can see here, Reason A with his masterclass, not able to do anything because he's getting pressured non-stop by the player up on height. Gets chopped down to his 0 mats, and he's going to go ahead and go down. You need to force these other players down as you're up on height, and then slowly layer your way down as you force them down. Make sure nobody's flanking around or sneaking back in storm. That could go ahead and chop you out, or go ahead and flank you. Now, as we get into final moving here, the most important tip I can give you guys to earn in solo cash cups, especially as you're in these intense situations, you're a bit nervous, you're a bit panicky, right? It's your first time earning, or you haven't had experience with this situation, right? Is try to play for the 1v1 at the end. Doesn't matter what you do, but just try to get it down to a 1v1 at the end, and that means that you're gonna have a 50% chance of winning just by maths, right? Instead of trying to get greedy here and fighting this other player on low ground or trying to steal the kill and get the mats or whatever, Owner of Castle instead lets the player on low ground do all the hard work for him. And in the process of this guy popping off and getting all these kills down on low ground, he's taken way too much damage. And now this guy's white heal off that he might have been trying to play for earlier, that might have been his win condition earlier, is basically gone because he has to go ahead and run in the open to get these mats. He's only got Cypher now, which means that Owner of Castle can just sit up on height. Very nicely here, he goes front side, pressures from front side on this right hand peak angle, exactly like he did in that earlier fight with the cash, and then does a nice right hand peek from above and takes out the other player. Don't overcomplicate these endgame guys, just try to play for that 1v1 at all costs, and I'm sure you guys are practicing enough 1v1s so that you can win them.